You are not being hated for nothing. That is the lie you keep telling yourself so you can survive the isolation. The truth is worse. The smarter you become, the more dangerous you are to fragile identities. And fragile identities defend themselves. You felt it. The shift in tone, the subtle exclusion, the conversations that tighten when you ask the wrong question. Not an offensive question, not an arrogant one, just a precise one. You don't attack people. You observe. You connect patterns. You notice contradictions. And somehow that alone makes you a problem. You replay the moments at night. Was I too intense? Too quiet? Too analytical? Did I expose something? Did I threaten something? You search for the mistake because believing you made one feels safer than accepting the alternative. That your intelligence destabilizes people who survive on certainty. Here is the fracture no one warned you about. Intelligence isolates before it elevates, not because you are superior, because you are less willing to lie to yourself. And when you stop lying to yourself, you unintentionally expose the lies others depend on. Most people build identity around comfort, around group approval, around narratives that protect ego. When you question those narratives calmly, you don't look rebellious, you look disloyal. And disloyalty, in social terms, is punished. This is not about being misunderstood. It is about identity threat. Your depth forces comparison. Your restraint forces reflection. Your refusal to perform shallow certainty creates discomfort. And discomfort left unchecked turns into resentment. They don't say, "You make me insecure." They say, "You're arrogant." They don't say, "You make me question myself." They say, "You think too much." They don't say, "I feel exposed." They say nothing. They withdraw. They mock. They exclude. And slowly, you start shrinking to make others comfortable. That is the real danger. Not their hatred. Your self-censorship. If you felt this silent rejection, this subtle hostility that has no clear cause, then you already know something is shifting inside you. Stay here. Subscribe if you're ready to examine it without self-pity, without fantasy, without weakness. This is not for everyone, because what's happening to you is not random, it's structural. And if you misunderstand it, you will either become bitter or invisible, and both are forms of decay. Continue only if you're ready to see why this isolation is not accidental, and why mishandling it will cost you more than loneliness. What you are experiencing is not random hostility. It is a predictable psychological response to perceived identity threat. And the more intelligent you become, the more likely you are to trigger it. Let's remove the emotion and dissect it. When someone encounters a person who thinks with depth, precision, and independence, their brain does not calmly evaluate the exchange. It scans for status shifts, for hierarchy disruption, for ideological instability. Intelligence, especially when quiet and controlled, disrupts unconscious ranking systems. You don't have to boast. You don't have to dominate. Your presence alone can destabilize fragile egos. Why? Because depth exposes superficiality without saying a word. This triggers ego defense. Ego defense is automatic. When a person senses that their competence, morality, or intelligence might be inferior in comparison, their nervous system reacts before logic does. The reaction is subtle but powerful: dismissal, minimization, sarcasm, exclusion. Not because you attacked them, because you activated comparison. And comparison is painful. Now layer in identity fragmentation. Most adults are not internally integrated. They present confidence, but carry private doubt. They preach certainty, but fear being exposed as confused. When someone like you enters the environment, observant, analytical, unwilling to perform shallow agreement, you become a mirror. Mirrors are not hated because they are cruel. They are hated because they are accurate. The human brain avoids cognitive dissonance aggressively. When reality threatens self-image, it has two choices: update the identity or eliminate the threat. Updating identity requires humility. Eliminating the threat requires labeling you as the problem. Most choose the second. This is where you begin to feel invisible or targeted at the same time. You're excluded from deeper circles, or quietly mocked, or treated as too much. The group protects cohesion over truth. Cohesion feels safe. Truth feels destabilizing. There is also strategic withdrawal happening inside you. After repeated micro-rejections, your nervous system adapts. You speak less, you reveal less. You test people before trusting them. You begin calculating social cost before expressing ideas. Not because you are weak, because your brain is trying to reduce social pain. And social pain is neurologically real. But here is the partial revelation. The hatred is rarely about your intelligence alone. It is about unresolved insecurity meeting unfiltered clarity. If this level of psychological analysis feels rare in your environment, subscribe. Not for motivation, for understanding. Most people don't want this conversation. That already separates you. But do not mistake separation for superiority. That is the trap waiting for you. Because if you respond to rejection with quiet arrogance, with internal contempt, you will fracture yourself further. You will become isolated not because they rejected you, but because you hardened in response. And that is where this becomes dangerous. The system that pushed you out can also reshape you into something colder than necessary. The question is not why they react. The real question is what this is slowly turning you into. And that answer is uncomfortable. There is a moment when you stop trying to belong. Not dramatically, not publicly, quietly. You speak less in rooms where you once tried to explain yourself. You observe more. You invest your energy selectively. From the outside, it looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like contraction. This is the collapse of the old identity. The version of you that believed intelligence would automatically earn respect begins to die. The version that assumed depth would be welcomed. The version that thought clarity would create connection. That model no longer functions. And if you are honest, you know it. So you withdraw. But understand what is happening beneath the surface. Solitude is not always depression. Silence is not always weakness. Withdrawal is sometimes restructuring. When external validation becomes unreliable, the psyche begins reorganizing itself around internal standards. That process feels cold because it removes illusion. The danger is misinterpreting this phase. If you interpret isolation as proof that you are superior, you will build a defensive identity. Detached, cynical, quietly contemptuous. That path feels powerful at first. It protects you from social pain, but it slowly erodes empathy. And without empathy, intelligence becomes sterile. If you interpret isolation as proof that you are defective, you will shrink. You will dilute your thoughts. You will perform ignorance to reduce friction. That path feels safer, but it dissolves your integrity. Both reactions are wrong. The collapse of the old self is necessary, but collapse without structure turns into decay. You are in a psychological liminal space. The old identity, seeking approval through intelligence, is dissolving. The new identity has not yet formed. This gap is unstable. Many men get stuck here. They either become isolated intellectuals who distrust everyone, or socially adaptive performers who distrust themselves. Neither is strength. Strength is integration, the ability to hold depth without needing to display it, the ability to remain perceptive without turning perception into a weapon, the ability to understand projection without becoming hostile toward those who project. But integration requires pressure, and pressure feels like loss. You may notice you tolerate fewer shallow conversations. You may feel impatience rising faster. You may find yourself analyzing people more critically. That is not growth yet. That is recalibration. Your psyche is testing new boundaries. Here's something I want to observe. Comment the city you're watching from. Not for visibility, for pattern recognition. I want to see where this quiet restructuring is happening, because it is happening in more men than you think. Now here is the tension you must face. If you rebuild incorrectly, you will armor yourself so heavily that no one can reach you. You will become intelligent but inaccessible, precise but disconnected, self-contained but alone. And the world will confirm your belief that you were never understood. The collapse is not the problem. The reconstruction is. And you have not yet decided who you are rebuilding into. At some point, you will be tempted to blame them. The culture, the group, the shallow conversations, the insecure co-workers, the fragile friends. It is easy to construct a narrative where you are the lone, rational mind surrounded by emotional mediocrity. That story feels powerful. It protects your ego. It explains the rejection. It is also incomplete. Yes, projection exists. Yes, identity threat is real. Yes, intelligent men are often misunderstood. But if you stay in that frame, you become reactive. And reactivity is weakness disguised as insight. You cannot control how others regulate their insecurity. You cannot control whether they interpret your depth as threat. But you are fully responsible for how you structure yourself in response. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Some of the isolation you experience is not caused by your intelligence. It is caused by how you carry it. There is a difference between clarity and quiet superiority, a difference between restraint and emotional distance, a difference between precision and subtle condescension. You may not intend it, but micro signals matter. Tone, timing, eye contact, facial tension, social calibration. Intelligence without social discipline creates friction. If you enter rooms scanning for hypocrisy, you will find it. If you listen only to detect logical gaps, people will feel dissected. If you speak primarily to correct, you will be categorized as adversarial, even if you are accurate. This is not about becoming agreeable. It is about cognitive control. Cognitive control means you choose when to deploy depth. You choose when nuance is useful. You choose when silence is strategic rather than defensive. That requires emotional containment, not suppression. Containment. Emotional containment is the ability to feel irritation without broadcasting it, to notice contradiction without immediately exposing it, to recognize projection without needing to correct it. Without structure, collapse turns into decay. Without discipline, isolation turns into bitterness. Bitterness is seductive. It feels like clarity. It feels like you see the game. But bitterness narrows perception. It reduces flexibility. It slowly converts intelligence into rigid identity. And once you become rigid, you are no longer adaptive. You are just another predictable pattern. You do not break victimhood by pretending rejection does not hurt. You break it by refusing to make pain your organizing principle. Ask yourself directly, where have you allowed resentment to shape your posture? Where have you used withdrawal as a shield instead of a strategy? Where have you confused being misunderstood with being superior? These questions are not attacks. They are calibration. If this confronts you, stay with it. Subscribe if you are building discipline instead of excuses. Most will not. Because responsibility is heavier than resentment, but it is also power. And without power over yourself, your intelligence will never translate into influence. It will remain potential, potential, unmanaged, becomes quiet regret. You were never hated for nothing. You were reacted to. There is a difference. Hatred feels personal. Reaction is structural. And once you understand the structure, you stop internalizing what was never about your worth. But clarity alone is not reconstruction. Reconstruction requires elimination, construction, and endurance. First, elimination. Eliminate the need to be recognized for your depth. That hunger leaks through behavior. It creates subtle tension. You do not need to prove intelligence. You refine it privately. You sharpen it without announcement. When you stop seeking validation for thinking clearly, you become harder to destabilize. Eliminate resentment as identity. You are not the misunderstood one. You are not too aware for this world. That narrative feels strong, but it locks you into opposition. Opposition is reactive. Strategic men are not reactive. Eliminate environments that reward intellectual dishonesty, not with drama, with quiet withdrawal. If a room punishes nuance, reduce exposure. Protect your energy without announcing your departure. Now construction. Build selective expression. Speak when it moves outcomes, not when it satisfies ego. Intelligence becomes influence when it is calibrated. Build internal hierarchy. Your standards must matter more than external approval. That does not mean isolation. It means alignment. When you evaluate yourself honestly, your discipline, your behavior, your consistency, you no longer need random approval to stabilize you. Build emotional steadiness. You will still trigger people. That does not stop. But you stop flinching at it. You observe projection without absorbing it. You recognize insecurity without attacking it. You remain composed. And endurance. Understand this clearly. Clarity carries social cost. Always has. Always will. The mistake is expecting comfort as a reward for awareness. The reward is autonomy. The reward is self-respect. The reward is internal coherence. When you handle rejection without shrinking or hardening, something shifts. You stop broadcasting defensiveness. You stop scanning for hostility. And paradoxically, people respond differently. Not all, but enough. Because grounded intelligence does not feel threatening. It feels stable. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be structurally solid. When you become solid, rejection stops feeling like identity damage and starts feeling like data. This is the transformation, not from hated to admired, from reactive to composed, from confused to deliberate, from fragmented to integrated. That is strength. If this version of you is the one you are building intentionally, then watch the next video that is appearing on your screen. It goes deeper into how to carry intelligence without isolation. Do not skip it if you are serious about restructuring, and subscribe only if you are committed to refining yourself strategically, not emotionally. You were never broken. You were just unstructured. Now you are not.